And it finally works. Hey, gang. Thanks for sticking with me here through these technical difficulties. And how about now? Thanks for sticking with me here through these technical difficulties. And you're going to hear some background noise, but nothing to be done about that. Yeah, Amy, you know what? Let's do that. It's not just Jake's own silliness and stupidity. Um, I had my phone plugged into my sound system here in my podcast studio, and just I was listening to music while in my headphones while I was getting everything arranged and set up for tonight. So I want to say uh, thanks. Thanks for sticking around here through these technical difficulties tonight on November 19th, 2023. This is the 60th episode of The Ghosts of Bacon. I'm your host, Jake Roberts, and we're finally starting. So thanks, gang. I appreciate it. Um, and like I said, Amy, I want to blame the aliens instead of my own silliness. So how are we doing, gang? I thought long and hard about what tonight's topic would be, and I settled upon a little known character from history that nearly no one ever references, um, and I want to demonstrate how important these minor references in history actually are to uh, the work that I do, and the yeah, I'm. Oh, thanks, Jan. Appreciate you. And you know, here's a guy by the name of John Drake. I mean, unless you are really reading the primary source materials in researching Sir Francis Drake, you're never going to hear the name. And so I found it really interesting uh, in terms of his backstory and where he comes from and who he's supposed to be and how we hear about him, most importantly. And so, what I put together for you is a little dog and pony show. I'm going to go ahead and present that here. Give me just a second. Yeah, that background noise you can hear. Yeah, it's our washer. It's the next room. It's going crazy right now. So I have no idea what's going on. So this guy named John Drake, who is he? Let me go ahead and make that full screen slideshow. That'll be better. There we go. That looks much better. So, you know, what I've discovered is that John Drake is yet another alias, a very early one of our friend Sir Francis Bacon. And so, and most of the people here who are watching live, you're very familiar with what it is that I've done. Um, and if this is your first time watching my material, a lot of the stuff I say I know sounds absolutely crazy, but it's all based upon what I call the plaque ciphertext. Now, the plaque that I refer to is the plaque of the funerary monument of William Shakespeare in Holy Trinity Church in Stratford-upon-Avon. And what I did was I discovered a transposition cipher within this plaque where if you rearrange each of these characters, multiple messages come through. And what I've discovered is this is pretty much the Rosetta Stone for the Fraternity of the Rosy Cross. There's no other way to describe it. It all starts here with this decryption, and my entire body of work to date is all based upon this. First of all, it contains Bacon's secret autobiography, and the main thrust of the message is the craziness that he was the son of Mary Queen of Scots and Francis II of France. Now, the nice part about this is that other people have kind of picked up the spear, so to speak, and have carried this work forward, and they too have corroborated a lot of my discoveries, what I found here. And what it's allowed me to do is put together what I call Bacon's Code Book. Now, Sir Francis Walsingham was Queen Elizabeth's spy master in Elizabethan England, and he has a spy book or a code book that is on display in the London Museum. Okay. I was in the plaque. Okay. Everyone, I have John Edwards on the phone, and he's just telling me that I went dead. Yeah, I'm struggling today. I have no idea what's going on with our internet.
No one can hear you right now.
But can you hear me now?
I'll go back to live. I'll just type in the comments.
Yeah, well, I have you on speakerphone right now, so you're on the show.
Oh, great. Yep, you're completely dead.
Okay. All right. Thanks, John. That was my good friend John Edwards telling me that, oh, you lost your connection. See, gang, here's what happens in the Ghost of Bacon studio. I have split screens, and I have different tabs open. The presentation is up on a different tab. And when I share the screen, oh, Facebook can hear me. Okay, thanks, bud. So, hey, Jason, thanks. Yes, I'm back. Did everybody hear John? Okay, good. I was hoping for that. That's why I put you on speaker, John. Thanks, buddy. You're a true friend. It's like all of a sudden I look down and I see my phone's ringing, and all I can see is the tab with my presentation going, because I can't see that I wonked out on StreamYard. So, yeah, well, John and I do have each other on speed dial, Jan, that's for sure. All right, gang. You know what? I'm going to try this again. Let's see what happens. I don't know. Strike 3 and I'm out. I'm just quitting. I'm telling you right now. All right. I think this is where I left off. I'm going to go back to where I talked about. Is this where I kind of blanked out? Is when all of a sudden I was talking about the plaque, gang. I'll wait for someone to reply. John had said that you saw the plaque, and then that's when it went black. Okay, folks, I'm just going to go from here. So, now no one's in the chat. So, no, David, I was not talking about his sex life. Would you just stop, please? Okay, so Ray says this is pretty much where I was. Okay, thanks, Amy. All right, so I love you guys. So what I did was, those of you watching for the first time, I discovered a transposition cipher, and it was nothing less than the secret autobiography of Sir Francis Bacon. I call this the Rosetta Stone for the Fraternity of the Rosy Cross, because in it contains all of the secrets that unlocked all of the values and their meanings. And passing these along to other researchers like Will and Jason and John, they've been able to corroborate what I've found here. Like I said, the subtitle of my first book is Bacon's Secret Autobiography. So from this, what I was able to do is recreate what I call Bacon's code book. Now, what this does is it expands what we call cipher signatures. Now, cipher signatures are when, we know that the number 33 represents the name Bacon. We know that 67 represents the name Francis, and 100 is Francis Bacon, because you add them together in simple cipher. So, these signatures have been used by Baconians over the years to identify, Bacon's fingerprints on the works of Shakespeare. Unfortunately, they do a lot more than just that. And so by expanding them, a lot of people were afraid that I was going to create what's called saturation. However, what we've really done is we've recreated Bacon's code book. Now, Francis Walsingham was Queen Elizabeth I's cipher master and code master and spy master. And so what he did was in I think it's the London Museum, there is his code book on display. Okay. And it has over 500 numbers that represent different words and ideas. And so what we've been able to do is recreate some of those numbers that Bacon and his company were using to communicate in their codes. So there's no worry of saturation because there's always a context there. So in those ciphertexts, in the transposition ciphers, I discovered messages about Sir Francis Drake. And one of them was F. Drake picked me as wisest astrologus, astrologus meaning astronomer. So he also said, I time meridians, which is really pretty cool. In that time period, it was very difficult to travel across the seas. And so they had to have someone as smart as Bacon to do the calculations for them. He then says that he had the time of his life as the first mate to Captain F. Drake. And so these messages made me recognize, first of all, Francis Bacon was a very skillful maritime traveler here and a sailor and astronomer. So another thing that happened is that when we look at Orthodox history, there are actually transcripts of prisoners who were taken aboard Francis Drake's ships when he would, basically be a privateer and commandeer the ships of Portugal and Spain. And one Spanish sailor made an interesting comment where he said, quote, he carries painters who paint for him pictures of the coast in its exact colors. This I was most grieved to see, for each thing is naturally depicted that no one who guides himself according to these paintings can possibly go astray. So you have to remember that the Spanish in their colonies, that they were, what they had established here, were state secrets. The average, people out there and other sailors, they didn't know where these colonies were. They were extracting amazing amounts of wealth and gold and silver from the continents of North and South America, Central America. And so this is why the Spanish sailor was so aggrieved, was because now other people would be able to identify the coastlines and what they looked like because these painters were so good. Now, one of the cornerstones of what I've been discussing and what I discovered was that Sir Francis Bacon and Sir Walter Raleigh were master Renaissance artists. And this is something that is not discussed in Orthodox history. However, it's one of the most foundational elements of what I've discovered of what they were doing as intelligencers and spies working for Queen Elizabeth. So another quote from the Portuguese sailor Nuno de Silva says, quote, he, Francis Drake, is an adept at painting and has with him a boy, John Drake, a relation of his, who is a great painter. When they both shut themselves up in his cabin, they were always painting. So again, we see the importance of art and painting and the science and art of being a great artist at work here. So when we look at John Drake, by the way, each of these paintings and images and maps, these are the work of Battista Boazio, who Francis Bacon says he created these images under that name. So I looked at John Drake in this context. I said, well, I'm going to run him through the alias formula. Now, those of you who have watched this show before and have seen my other videos, you know that I've been able to parse out what I call the Rosy Cross alias formula. And to do it, you have to use what's called fourfold cipher. And fourfold cipher involves letters that appear more than once in a name or phrase or word. And when it comes to John Drake, there are no repeating letters. And so since there are no repeating letters, suddenly, fourfold no longer applies. And it's exactly the same as what we call simple cipher when we assign the letter A, the number 1, all the way to Z as number 24 in the Elizabethan alphabet. So it becomes the same as simple cipher. This indicated to me that he created this alias before he had created the alias formula. And so when we add up the letters of John Edwards, I know you're watching, in simple cipher, it's 44. We know that 44 was what Peter Dawkins refers to as Bacon's secret signature. The reason it's his secret signature is that is the value of the word rex, R-E-X, in simple cipher, which is Latin for king. So when we look at the last name of Drake and we add all of these up in simple cipher, 1 being A, Z being 24, we have 37. And then when we total this, it's 81. 81 is the value of Francois in simple cipher, his secret identity as the son of King Francis II of France and Mary Queen of Scots. So that right there indicated to me that this alias was created before his alias formula, if that makes sense. So to that end, let me go ahead and switch the view here. And so this made me curious. What if that was the case, then what were the values in reverse cipher and K cipher, the other ciphers he was known to use? And reverse cipher totals, John Drake totals 144 in reverse cipher, which is the same as Rex Francis Bacon in simple cipher. The K value is 211, which people who've been following my work for a while know that this is the K cipher value of just the words Rosy Cross without the letters fra in front of it. It's also the value K cipher value of Stuart King. So in this way, we see that John Drake's name points to Rex Francis Bacon, Francois, Stuart King. So going back to Francis Bacon's role on Drake's ship, he was his wisest astronomer, he states. He states that he times the meridians, and this role is very, very important in traveling across the Atlantic. And then when we consider all of the work of these famous painters and artists, we see that he had time to create a volume of artwork underneath these, not just artwork, but also writings. He could also write, 152 sonnets, and then someone else would add 2 to the end to have a perfect number of 154. Something we looked at in my next book. There was time to do this and time to create. So when we look at all of this together, what we have is once more corroboration in just this one name. Okay, here's a small name from someone in history that very few people have ever heard of. But in my mind, he's just as significant and just as important as, say, John Dee, in that he not only corroborates this concept of Bacon as artist and someone who was on Francis Drake's ships, but the role that he played in terms of an intelligencer, of recording the coastlines and the maps of the travels of Sir Francis Drake as he's attacking the Spanish and their settlements in the Americas. And so this grieved the Spanish sailors a great deal, because these were their secrets that they kept for their own monarchy. But here was here was Francis Bacon recording it for Sir Francis Drake and obviously Queen Elizabeth. So really looking for your thoughts. Not drawn to scale, Jan. It's so funny. What they did was they had in multiple images, and particularly the Champlain maps, for example, pictures of flora and fauna. And there he was kind of playing with the details of what that alligator would really look like scientifically. And along with, if you count little bumps on his back, you get Bacon signatures. But great question, Jason. you know, when you look at the timeline of the Golden Hind, of when it became the Golden Hind, uh, that was much later, I think. Uh, I don't think he had the Golden Hind during his first circumnavigation or his second. Um, Bacon was not on board during the first circumnavigation. He was in France. It's also simple cipher equal Marlowe and Yondon or Johnson. No, it's not a coincidence. Lon, as usual, spot on. However, Marlowe was not Bacon. Marlowe was, as you'll see in my next book, I identify Christopher Marlowe as being an early alias of a young um, Walter Raleigh. When Bacon was on Drake's ship, was what was Shakespeare up to in England, or it's at the time Shakespeare was sick and hiding behind the screen? Shakespeare, Jan, wasn't sick and hiding behind the screen. That was Francis Bacon later in life. Now, I think what you're referring to is something different. Shakespeare, when Bacon was on his ship, no one had heard of William Shakespeare yet. Um, it wasn't until much later. Uh, Bacon was probably about 18 years old when he was on Drake's ship. One of the things that I found is, how do I say this? I believe the sonnets attributed to the actor William Shakespeare, or we know him as Shakespeare, they were written when Bacon was probably in his teens, between the ages of 16 and 18. Um, and I have a bunch of very good reasons for believing so. So we think that all of the works of Shakespeare were created right around the same time. I don't think so. I think that they were sporadic and then finally published all at once. Um, yeah, you know what, Ao? I never ceased to have my mind blown by this information ever. AO writes, I am mind blown at the lengths and depth Francis Bacon went in order to create a small army of aliases that all carried the same messages. And the idea is repeatability. The idea of constantly making sure that that message is going to get through from one of them. And I agree. It's one of the things that I'm always. And Jenny, once again, coming to the did Bacon have any children? And according to Orthodox history, no. And as Amy said right after, that he had no known kids. Um, hey Z, good to see you. It's okay. Glad you could make it. You know what? How do I properly talk about this idea? And Jason, I don't want to step in your toes. I mean, I know you have a theory about this, about whether or not Bacon had, a child or not. According to Orthodox history, he had no known children. And here's the problem. If he had, that child would have been heir to the throne of France and England. Okay. And there are people within both royal families who knew that as a fact. I know that's true. So if he did, and that child also had heirs, and there's a bloodline out there, well, you have another royal bloodline of Europe that's heir to the thrones of both England and France, and that becomes very problematic with some extremely powerful people. So, yeah, I don't have an opinion on the matter. Great question. Well, you know what, and Jan, just you're talking about here in the chat. I didn't get a chance to put it up on the screen. The idea is it's not, when we're talking about his age when he wrote the plays, he had help. There's the rival poet that we need to deal with, who also had a hand in writing the plays. I think that when my next book comes out, I think some of the De Vere the Oxfordians, the De Vere people, are going to be happy with what I've discovered, and the others are going to be just completely irate with what I've discovered about De Vere and whether or not he had a role in the writings of William Shakespeare. It's complicated, and so once we start looking at his age, just because of certain elements, I'll put it this way. I believe that Bacon started writing the works of Shakespeare much earlier. Like I said, the sonnets, I based upon cipher elements and then just chronologically of what happened in Bacon's real life, along with those around him, that they had to have been written when he was a teenager in his late teens. So, yeah, whether or not the plays were, I think the plays were written, along the way, and then finally published, in the 1600s. But and again, Amy, that's a possibility. There are elements of, Queen Elizabeth said that she was, Richard III without any heirs and so on, which was the play that Essex asked to be performed the night before he attacked the court during the Essex's rebellion. Barbara with a great question. So the expectation of children of nobles after education was a military service for a tactical or political advantage in life. It certainly seems that way, Barbara. It certainly does bear out in terms of these children who were the secret children of kings and queens. And Stephanie, I've heard Bacon is of the Merovingian bloodline. Others have speculated the same thing, whether or not, you can trace the houses of Valois and Angoulême back to the Merovingians. I'm not sure. I know, Amy, you are into heredity. Well, you know what? That's just it. Yeah, people within and this is one of the big things. It happens even today, gang. I mean, when you look at here in the States, our own political system, you have, politicians and their spouses working for Raytheon. What's that pillow talk like in terms of, hey, we have a contract coming up. What are we going to do? Where they both profit. This is how things are done even today, and it's not we don't even have royalty, so to speak, here in our own political landscape. But it's how things are done for sure. And when it's within the family, it's easier to keep a secret for sure. And you know what, Jan, that's the rub. That is the key issue here. This is why Bacon and others went to such great lengths to encode these truths in all these different places, in the plaque, in artwork, in maps. My next book, I kind of run the gamut of here's all the corroborating evidence that supports these preposterous ideas, and it's all right there. It's right there in the bedrock of cipher evidence. So, and the thing is, it's like if they don't recognize him, they're not going to recognize the children. But if all of a sudden you have a series of ciphers that point you into the direction of where his royal birth records are, for example, Oak Island, then you could always prove the case. Jenny, that's my hypothesis as well. If he did have children, it wouldn't be public specifically for that reason, and plus to protect them because they would be targets. Okay, part of the reason why I actually, people have asked me, well, why would Queen Elizabeth do this to Bacon or anyone else? And there was someone else, by the way, which I'll be getting into in the future, and it comes out in my next book. Most people say, well, she did this to protect herself. Yes, she did that to protect herself. However, I think that in a secondary sense, Bacon would have been her cousin as Francis Stewart or Francis Angoulême. And so she also would have extended her protection to him, having him raised in the household of Sir Nicholas and Lady Anne, for sure. You know what, AO? It's logical, isn't it? Even if Francis never knew he fathered any kids, I still believe the bloodline survived. Francis was a daddy before he died, although this is speculation. Yeah, I know I'm right, Halls. Well, it's entirely possible, man. You know. And, Amy makes a point. This is a family who killed a family who is a threat to their power. I think that's what happened. I think that Catherine de Medici, from what I've seen in the ciphertext, I think she killed her own son, Francis II. She disliked and hated Mary so much. She didn't want Mary stepping in and becoming queen regent in her place when she was the current queen regent. There's no way she would have allowed that. And I think she's willing to kill for it, for sure. So, yeah, Stephanie, revolving door. We could go on and on about that, you and I'm pretty sure. What an interesting question, and I love your name, Merlin. Did Bacon consider the King Arthur bloodline as myth? I don't know. I haven't seen it. And, a lot of people ask me that question about, Bacon's opinions about the Ark of the Covenant, about the Knights Templar. And I've seen no cipher evidence or texts or references to any of these things, including Arthur. So I have no answer for you, unfortunately. Yeah, Jen, you heard it the first time. You know what, Lon? There was a rumor, but I've never seen the document about it. He did marry a very young girl when he was in France, reportedly, uh, apparently for the dowry. But then again, since he was an alias, the wife eventually, when she grew up, she became a nun. So there are no children there, I guess. There was a rumor that Bacon had married a Native American woman while in Montreal as well. So there's also that. Stephanie, no judgment here. Oh, that's interesting, Jason. I didn't know this. Jason Mercer coming on saying that Bacon is a descendant of King Arthur by a great grandfather that was a king. Again, if we could find historical evidence of King Arthur, I'm all over that. I'm a huge fan of that idea. Yeah, Z. Once again, chiming in with good historical references. Catherine de Medici is said to have murdered about 9 people, including foreign dignitaries. I think those are the ones we can account for. I have a feeling that there's probably just as many we don't know about. Yeah, she was something else. Yeah, Merlin, I think that Dee probably would have been familiar with the concept. In fact, I think he referenced Merlin in a couple of his works, and a lot of people viewed him as Elizabeth's Merlin the magician. I'm assuming he would definitely be aware. I don't know, Frank. Maybe you're the guy. Your initials are FAM. Your mother's Mary. Your father's Francis. Your name's Francis. You never know, my friend. And here's the other side of it. Z, this is what I was always taught, and what I've always believed is that King Arthur was actually fictional, nothing more than a legend. Like I said, if we can find solid historical evidence that that person of that name, and I know that there are variations of it, and so on, Arthur Pendragon, and different versions and spellings of that name, but yeah, I try to stay away from things that are that speculative. Oh, there we go. There's Jason. It was a verbal claim that was documented as the king making the claim. Oh, good to know, Jason. And you have to remember that it wasn't uncommon for royals back then to claim that they're descendant from mythological or people from folklore, for sure, or even gods and goddesses. So Frank was born January 15th. I was born January 20th, Frank. We're very close. All right, gang. You know what? I knew this was going to be a short one this evening, and barring all of those technological glitches and issues I was having there earlier, it's coming up on that hour. And so, like I said, I want to thank you all for joining me and sticking with all of those, sticking through all of those problems I was having with the sound there earlier. All I had to do was unplug one cord, and next thing you knew, there's magic. Speaking of Merlin. So, this is episode 60 of Ghosts of Bacon in the Books. And what I'm going to do is sign off, and thank you once again. Until next time, just be cool to each other, and we will be back in a couple of weeks, folks. Thanks for joining me. Appreciate you guys. Night.